College football nerds, with our game of the week, Texas and LSU. Y'all knew it was going to be Texas and LSU, but what you might not have known about Josh and I, if you're new to the show, is that neither one of us can pick Texas or LSU to save our lives. If we pick LSU or Texas to win, they lose. And if we pick them to lose, they make us look like idiots. So what we're going to do this time is a little bit of a debate format where I'm taking Texas, Josh is taking LSU, and we're going to go back and forth. And so here we go. Remember, like, subscribe, comment below. And in your comment below, obviously give us a score, but also tell us who you think won the debate. All right, for my opening shot, I'm going to let you know right now, Texas is not scared to match the physicality of an SEC team. We saw this against Georgia last year, and we saw even in Big 12 play that the one thing that Texas had going for them over all the other teams was their physicality. And we saw LSU last year, the more physical teams inside the SEC. This ain't UCF, baby. This is Texas football, kind of like LSU on the lines of scrimmage, huge wide receivers. Mississippi State gave them fits last year. Of course, Alabama out-physicaled them last year. Even Florida, same kind of thing. So I think if I'm going to go ahead and put a check on my side of the curtain, the aisle, whatever you want to say, it's that Texas can match LSU in terms of physicality. What you got?
Well, there's two sides to that. One, they may want to be able to match LSU's physicality when LSU has the ball, but I'm not sure Texas is really prepared to match LSU's physicality when Texas has the ball. LSU's had a pretty significantly large team for a while at most positions. They've got physicality and talent across the defensive front. They've done a lot to sort of beef things up. I mean, they've got guys like Fehoko that are huge. They've got Ika coming in at nose tackle. You got Rashard Lawrence when he's healthy. It's huge. I mean, it's a massive front line, but it goes beyond that. At the second level, Queen and Stevens are big guys. Even the true freshman Stingley at corner is a huge player. And when I say that just in terms of, 6 foot plus, 190, 200, 210 pounds at every position in the secondary. They're big. They're physical. I thought Delpit was going to kill some guys in the Georgia Southern game. I mean, they had him running the lane on the triple option, and it was brutal. I mean, Georgia Southern's a triple option team. They ended the game with 74 yards rushing. So one, I don't think that they're going to really have this big physical edge. And when Texas has the ball, they don't have a little Jordan Humphrey again. They don't have that massive size advantage, and their backs aren't huge at Texas. And you got, a lot of turnover. Now, on the offensive side of the ball, I'll sort of turn around and make a positive point on my side, which is LSU is a new-look offense this year, no doubt. And there was a lot of talk about it, and we weren't quite sure how it was going to pan out. But Joe Burrow last year, to everyone's ire, including our own, was captain 55%. He wasn't 55% in this game. He was 23 of 27 against Georgia Southern, 278 yards, 5 touchdowns. Okay? And he's got a lot of targets, and they're able to get him the ball. Terrace Marshall had 4 receptions for 31 yards, 3 touchdowns for LSU. And they were finding creative ways on screens, on short passes to make sure they had it. And even when they didn't have downfield threats, they threw the ball to the running back very efficiently. So I think even if Texas has physicality in the defense, which is a point I'll grant you, I don't know that Texas necessarily has the blend of speed and physicality to be able to match up with LSU skill players that are really at a higher level than LSU's had in years.
Yeah, and we've heard LSU's got a new look offense before. I think we've heard it about 15 years in a row. They might got a seemingly great passing game coordinator from right down the road in New Orleans. But what they probably don't still have, they ain't got a running game. And Ingram, we know, is a known quantity at Texas, and he's still looking good this year. I'm going to give you a number, and I'm going to have you defend it because we do get nerdy around here every once in a while. Last year, LSU 91st in yards per carry in their run game, and kind of got the same guys back there running again this year. What you got?
So first, and the number's the number, but there's a couple things that I would expound on from that. One, LSU had 0 creativity offensively last year, and their run game suffered as a result of it. They had a little bit of injury issues, and even against Georgia Southern, they don't have the starting left tackle in the game. Probably going to have him back for the Texas game. But I'm going to give you a name that matters, and that's John Emery. And he didn't start that game against Georgia Southern, but looking at that game, Edwards, Ehlinger, and Fournette, they're solid backs. Emery's special, and you could see that right out of the gate. And Emery ended up with as many carries in the game as Fournette did when all was said and done. I think Emery's the heir apparent for LSU. I think he's going to be the solve for a lot of their wounds. When you combine that with the ability to actually get the ball on the perimeter with any sort of consistency to get people to stop putting 8 in the box, I think LSU can get back to running the ball. And again, even if they're not running it, with Burrow, they have the ability to efficiently distribute the ball. And the backs got, quite a bit of work in the passing game. So, they're going to get the backs involved. They're going to get them involved effectively. And I think the run game is going to improve just by virtue of the passing game. And that's even if Mr. Emery doesn't come on soon. Because if he doesn't come on in the Texas game, which we don't know, I guarantee you late in the season, he's going to be a major factor.
Yeah, and I loved Emery coming out of high school. The issue is it's week 2. What we saw last week with Auburn is Bo Nix might be great for Auburn at quarterback by the end of the year. But against Oregon, it almost cost him the game. And so what it tells me that because we all know running back is that one position where you can make the most impact game 1 as a freshman. It's running back. Except for, and this is why Emery probably isn't in the game, pass protection. And I feel like if he's still third on the depth chart behind Leonard, not Leonard, and Edwards Ehlinger, it's because they don't trust him in pass pro, which is a big deal. So week 2, you got Texas. It may not matter that he's great in week 12. So this may not be fair, but I'm going to go ahead and put that as a point in my bucket. I'm using all kinds of point metaphors tonight. I don't think they trust Emery, but I do think that he could have, if I'm going to concede something, I do think he could have a couple breakout plays in this game. But I think that Georgia had a pretty good run game last year. And what we saw was Jake Fromm was an elite passer for most of the season. Where was he not an elite passer? In games where Georgia couldn't run the ball. And sort of the inverse, the opposite to your point of how the run game opens up the pass game. Let's say that Joe Burrow is improved. Let's say that the passing game coordinator is helping them. Joe Brady's got it going on. But if they can't run the ball, Texas's defense is good enough to start to cause problems in the passing game as well. What do you think?
So I'm going to have 2 points in rebuttal for that. One, I think Texas's biggest strengths are also often their biggest weaknesses. Texas is very aggressive under Orlando. And when they were playing in that La Tech game, it was 21-0 at the half, right? But that was deceptive. La Tech had their opportunities in that game. One, La Tech had 2 missed field goals in the first half. They had a busted coverage where the quarterback couldn't complete the throw on a deep pass, and they had a receiver drop the ball on the 5-yard line. Just if you look at the missed field goals and the busted coverage on the deep pass, it really, with competent quarterback play and competent kicking play, that's a 21-10 ball game. So I think when Orlando is overly aggressive, when he's able to sort of shut things down, even if he's able to shut down the run, he's going to do it with blitzes. And the Burrow's strongest point that pretty much everybody in the country agrees on is he does an excellent job of managing the offense, at executing the offense, at finding the open guy and moving the ball downfield. LSU is going to be able to find a way to get yardage with Burrow, and I feel pretty confident in saying that. So even if they're not operating at a really high level, I think they're going to operate at a pretty darn good level. And if this ends up being a slugfest, I think they're going to find a way to get points pretty consistently. And that last part is how I'm going to turn it around to you, and that's if this becomes a slugfest. Because, yeah, Texas may be able to slow down LSU's offense. And to be honest, I think Texas is probably going to make it pretty tough on LSU's offense, even though they have a lot of new players. And again, there were signs of hiccups in that All Tech game, even if it didn't show in the scoreboard. LSU's got a really freaking good defense. And as I already said, they're huge in the defensive line, they're huge in the secondary. But there's this guy named Chason that hasn't been there on the field, and he is a hoss. And when Texas is trying to operate their offense, they're going to have to deal with a high-level pass rusher on top of what is probably the best secondary in the country. And as good as LSU's been the past couple years, their Achilles heel is that they couldn't rush the passer. And now that they actually have an elite pass rusher, this defensive unit could actually be considerably better than they were last year. So I don't really see how Texas is going to be able to score points in this game.
You're right. They do get a little bit back in terms of a pass rush that they didn't really have last year, but they do take a little bit of a step back by losing the best linebacker in the country. And I think Greedy Williams is going to be missed a little bit. I know people will argue that they still have the best secondary in the country. I think they do. But what we saw last year with Alabama is that when they had one great pass rusher in Christian Miller, when he was out of the game, when he was gassed, or when he got hurt, pass rush went to nothing. And I don't think you can put your entire defensive strategy or needs on one single pass rusher who will be disruptive throughout the game. And I think Chason will probably cause 2 or 3 drives to end. He's not going to be 100% effective every play if he's having to see quarterback, get quarterback every play. So I think there'll be still some opportunities. I'm going to put a question to you about Texas because we talked about in our preview how Texas is recruiting at a level that their defense, yes, they lost a lot of players and a lot of experience off of that defense, but they're recruiting at a level that they're kind of reloading and not rebuilding. And I think we saw a pretty powerful, aggressive defense opening weekend. I know not a great opponent, but my question to you is, maybe take your defending LSU hat off and just looking at it from that perspective, do you think some of the fears about Texas defense is going to suck because they lost all these players is a little unwarranted, and they've shown that they were able to reload instead of rebuild?
Well, first, I'm going to point out that you're cheating because, you're going to use your host abilities to make me actually have to defend Texas here. But...
No, you can say that it's not. You can say that you still have some concerns. That's fine, too.
Sure. Well, you know that I agree with you. When you watch that game with Texas, they're flying all around the field, right? And those linebackers that showed up in the game against Georgia that were stepping in for guys that weren't present in that game were really good players. It's obvious that they're really good players. It's obvious that Texas has a really good squad. And I don't think there's any doubt that, for the most part, Texas is reloaded. Asai is a great player. I watched McCullough came up, nearly took a guy's head off on an inside play. There's physicality, and even if some guys are experienced, some guys aren't, but you almost can't tell. Everybody on that defense looks like they're big, they're fast, they're physical, they know where they're supposed to be, and they know what they're supposed to be doing. And you know what? They're aggressive enough that I think they kind of get away with it to a large extent, that it hides it. Now, again, the flip side to that, you can talk about reloading, but what we saw from Alabama last year is that reloading moniker means you can be pretty good, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be elite. And Alabama had issues all last season, despite all their 5 stars, and trying to operate at a very high level. And again, it comes back to me that in this game, in week 2, I kind of wonder how much Texas is going to have little glitches. And given the improvements that LSU's made offensively, given the fact that they have a quarterback that truly is very good at taking what the defense gives him, and now is operating this offense that's more RPO based, I think that's going to put a lot of strain on them. All these Texas defenders, when they're having to make proper reads in an RPO style offense, they're having to figure out if they want to play the runner, if they want to play the pass. And you got a quarterback in Burrow that, as much as he struggled at times last year, is really comfortable running that style offense. I think they're going to hit some big plays because it doesn't matter how fast Texas defenders are. If they're running the wrong direction, it isn't going to help them.
You know what? I'm going to give you credit. I think you get a point for LSU. All right, so you asked me a question earlier about what happens when this game turns into a slugfest. And if I'm Texas, I love it. Sam Ehlinger, to quote my guy Gary V, Sam Ehlinger lives in the dirt. He loves it. He wants a knockdown, drag-out, hard-fought kind of win where he's running the ball and it might be 4 yards a carry, but 3 of those runs in a row are touchdowns. That kind of thing is what he wants to do. So I think Texas is used to that. We saw that in the Georgia game. That Georgia game was ugly. Texas fans like to talk about how how that game went and they own the SEC and whatever. They won that game fair and square, but they won that game with physicality and grit, not with Big 12 air raid grace and running a track meet. They won that game in the trenches with the dogs. So if I'm Texas, that's the kind of game I want. If I'm Texas, actually, based on what you said about how aggressive they played defensively and how we've seen that Sam Ehlinger sometimes can struggle in a track meet, that's the way I want the game to go. I don't want the game to be 44-41. I want the game to be physical. So I'm okay with that. And we kind of talk about Sam Ehlinger. We've gone this long without talking about him. I think we've got the running game. I think we both agree is in Texas's favor. Maybe not. I think the lines are probably pretty equal. This game is probably going to come down to quarterback play. And for me, I'm not, and just in all fairness, because, full disclosure, I'm not a huge Sam Ehlinger fan, but he's been there and done that in huge games on big stages, enough to grit out wins or enough to keep his team in the game. So I'm putting my money with that guy. Tell me why I shouldn't.
So we don't run a model until week 4 because we don't have enough data, and we don't like to run our model just based off what a team did last year because, yeah, it's probably right most of the time, but we're not really telling you anything you didn't know if we just say they were good last year, they'll be good this year. But we did run a model last year for the championship game. Now, it did say Georgia would win. Now, it said they'd only win by 6 in a 32-26 game, but it was pretty accurate about what it thought of Texas offensively. It thought Texas was going to score 26 points. Of course, they scored 28, so you're right in the same ballpark. It thought Texas was going to run the ball for 3.5 yards per carry. They ran the ball for 3.6 yards per carry. It thought they'd have about 6 yards per attempt. They had 6.3 yards per attempt. Texas's offense against Georgia was nothing that we weren't expecting them to have in that game. And it's easy to say Ehlinger had a great game, and it's easy to say Texas had a great game against Georgia, but it's only really true because Georgia's offense stalled and was unsuccessful. And Georgia's defense, let's be clear, like what happened to the LSU game, because the LSU fans have a right to talk about the fact that they beat the crap out of Georgia, a lot worse than Texas did. Georgia struggled with most of the good offenses they faced, really, and only arguably with the exception of Alabama, and Alabama played like crap in that championship game. I think there's a lot to be said for the fact that, maybe Texas isn't quite as battle-tested as people like to make them out to be. That last year, they didn't really play a lot of elite defenses in the regular season, and really, they didn't really play any great defenses in the regular season. They caught Georgia in a bowl game, but one, that whole unmotivated line carries some weight. 2, they didn't do anything offensively that we weren't expecting them to do. And finally, I'm going to make a point that we made in our preview about Texas when we referred to them last season, right? It's easy to talk about how great Texas was in their big wins, but everybody throws out all the other games. I mean, when you have 7, 8 one-score wins, when you're losing to Maryland, but not just losing to Maryland, you're barely beating Tulsa, when you're barely beating Texas Tech, when you're barely beating Baylor, that matters as much as beating Georgia in a bowl. So, yeah, Ehlinger is battle-tested, but Ehlinger has also shown that he can put up some clunkers in about any game they play. And that was with an excellent veteran defense to back him up. They don't have that in this game. And so that's why I would say, Burrow's pretty good too. And at the end of the day, and I know you know this stat and you've parroted it before, Burrow is a really similar passer statistically than what Ehlinger has been, and the guy's just as battle-tested as Ehlinger is.
I mean, yeah, but if you're going to point that out, that they struggled against some bad teams, which they did, you also got to point out that LSU put up like 12 offensive points against Mississippi State and 19 points against Florida, and I think Burrow might have thrown 2 pick sixes in that game. And I will say, I hate when people point to the A&M game and say the LSU gave up 74 points. Y'all, it was 7 overtimes. They were tired. That's not a fair comparison, but they did let a pretty pedestrian Texas A&M team kind of hang around enough to win. I don't think the UCF game is fair because I think LSU fielded mostly walk-ons in that game. But then you've got that 29-0 against Alabama. So, for all that you reasonably say about Texas doing what we expected against Georgia offensively, what they didn't do is defensively what we expected. And they outperformed Alabama against Georgia. They outperformed maybe LSU against Georgia. I have to look at the numbers. It was pretty similar, especially when you consider the last touchdown for Georgia against Texas was in garbage time, mostly against the prevent defense. So to me, and I want to take the debate format away for just a second, to me, it sounds like we're talking around basically saying these are almost the same team. Is that kind of what you think?
It is, frankly. And, I think it's probably true that a lot of the strengths that both teams point to for their own team are going to be true of the other team. And, I made this point to you, but I'm going to make it more clearly. Both these teams are going to be hyping up their quarterback in this game, Ehlinger and Burrow. And the reason is both get praised by some, maligned by others, but they're both gritty guys. They both make good plays. They're both good runners. They're both pretty efficient and know how to run the offense. And you know what? Statistically, they're a lot alike. Ehlinger last year, 65% completion percentage, but he was 7.7 yards per attempt, 25 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 146.8 QB rating. Joe Burrow, 7.6 yards per attempt, almost the exact same number as Ehlinger, 16 touchdowns to 5 interceptions, 3-to-1 ratio, again, pretty similar to Ehlinger, 133 QB rating. Now, Burrow was not as good as Ehlinger statistically, I get that, but they were pretty darn close. And our biggest statistic is yards per attempt, and that number was about dead even between the two. And yes, Burrow had a lower completion percentage, but the point is when he did complete a pass, it was on average for more yardage than Ehlinger did, so it all kind of balances out at the end of the day, and that was despite being in an offense that wasn't really overly good. I think these teams are a lot alike, and I think the biggest thing that's going to really make or break this game is, one, the ability of both offenses to generate big explosive plays, and two, both these defensive coordinators are known for their aggression. And is that aggression going to be a positive or a negative for the respective team? Is the aggression going to create negative plays for the other team, or is it going to give opportunities that the opposing quarterback can capitalize on? Now, if I want to put my LSU hat on, I'll say Aranda's got a more experienced unit defensively, and I think it's probably less likely that LSU has busts. But, with you and your Texas hat, I think there's probably the opposite argument that Texas's offense has shown that they can throw haymakers maybe a little better than LSU can.
All right, so the my bookie line on this right now is LSU is a 4.5-point favorite. Let's get into score predictions. Go ahead and give me yours. What do you think in this one for a score?
I think this game's going to be, I'm going to throw out a score of 28-21 LSU. And that's not just me having my LSU cap on. I think LSU wins this game. Now, I think Texas is a very, very good ball club. But I think LSU is just in a peak year this season. I think if this was late in the season and Texas was more gelled defensively, it would be even more competitive. I could see this game being even bigger win for LSU, frankly. It's just, given how good the defenses are, I think both teams are going to have a hard time scoring into the 30s. I see this season for LSU, and I hinted at this in another video, I see it setting up a lot like 2011. LSU has got a phenomenal defense. They've got all the pieces they need to be successful. The pieces that are stepping in, like at linebacker, actually have played a good bit of snaps. They're really talented. Offensively, they've got talent all around the skill positions. My only slight questions with the offensive line, but I think LSU has a chance to come out here, beat Texas, and basically be battling maybe A&M, but probably Alabama for the SEC West. Harder road to hoe, I know, in the East with Georgia being really good, but I think LSU has a very, very good shot of ending the season with one loss or fewer.
All right, so for me, I've got Texas 24, LSU 21. It sounds like both of us feel, like we just said, these are very similar teams, and it is going to be kind of a slugfest. I think Texas will show that they can match LSU physicality wise, but I also think that Ehlinger is probably going to hit a couple of bombs. I also think he's going to struggle a little bit. We saw this in the Big 12 championship game last year. There's going to be some open wide receivers that he just misses. That's just who he is. He did it again last weekend. That's just kind of who he is. But he also is going to get you something that you don't expect. So I think we're going to see a couple of those just bombs from him. Okay, so again, putting the debate format aside and kind of doing a role reversal. I want you to give me a positive that maybe people aren't thinking about Texas, and I'm going to give you one right now for LSU. Texas fans know that Sam Ehlinger can run the ball. What people may not know about Joe Burrow is he's a sneaky good runner, and I think that might play into this game. We talked about how LSU may not have the run game quite there yet, but want to use the run to set up the pass. Burrow is going to take advantage of a couple of runs in key, like, 2nd and 9 type situations and get a first down enough to keep Texas thinking about at least having to be honest with him as a runner. He's not an elite runner, and I don't think he's as good of a runner as Sam Ehlinger, especially not as a function of their offense, but it's there and he surprises people. I think we're going to see that Saturday.
I think Texas's biggest advantage in this game is that they're going to be more used to a fast pace of play than LSU is. And LSU's done a lot to shore up size on the defensive line. I already talked about Ika coming on, and they got Shelvin coming on as a sophomore. They put both those guys on the line at times with Rashard Lawrence and Fahoko, and they've got like 330 guys across the board. The problem with that is that Texas is used to playing in a style of offense where they can run the ball horizontally a lot and wear out a defensive line. And I'm not entirely sure outside of Chason how well LSU's front is going to be able to really affect the game if Texas is able to keep the ball away from them. And I think Texas, frankly, not trying to take away from my positives here, I think they probably are at a disadvantage at receiver compared to LSU's corners. That's true of everybody in the country, but I think Texas is going to struggle with separation. But what Texas is going to probably be able to do is have a lot of physicality on LSU's corners and safeties and linebackers, where they're not going to worry about getting a ton of separation. They're just going to make sure the ball gets out to the perimeter, and then they're going to run over who's in front of them.
All right, y'all. LSU and Texas is in the books, and please remember, let us know in the comments what you think this score is going to be, and maybe there's a key talking point that we missed about this game. Make sure you back it up with data. Thanks so much, y'all. Have a great week. God bless.